It's true. And so if we're going to develop something, this is a good place to start. To think deliberately and with a purpose. To spend a little time each day before a blank sheet of paper with our goal perhaps written at the top, and come up with some fresh, new, and exciting ideas. The next point on our checklist, you might call the law of laws. That's what Emerson called it, the great old law of cause and effect. That our rewards in life will always be in exact proportion to our contribution, to our service. We all know this, really. We tell our children in Sunday school that as ye sow, so shall ye reap, but we forget that that's true. If a man is unhappy with his rewards, all in the world he's got to do is find ways of increasing his contribution, his service. It's like the story of the preacher who was driving down a country road, and all of a sudden he came to the most magnificent farm he'd ever seen in his life. It was beautiful. And so he saw the farmer approaching the road on his tractor, and so he hailed him, and he said, "My good man," he said, "God has certainly blessed you with a magnificent farm." And the farmer thought for a moment, and he said, "Yes, you're right, he certainly has. But you should have seen this place when he had it all to himself." And the preacher had his sermon for the next Sunday. He realized that all the farmers up and down that road had been given the same land, but one man had made something great out of it. Well, all of us are given the same land. We're given a human life, and each of us can make something great out of it, too, if we want to. The next point might be simply the word truth. Since everything we do has an equal and opposite reaction, unless what we're doing is based on truth, we're building on sand, and it can't stand. The next point would be R&D, research and development. None of us would want to work for a company or invest our money in a company that didn't have a very viable research and development department. That is, pumping a good percentage of its profits back into research and development because its future depends on it. But so does a man's. And you might ask yourself, how much of your own take-home pay have you spent during the past year for materials calculated to make you smarter this year than you were a year before? Calculated to make you a little better, a little bigger as a human being, to perhaps love a little more and hate a little less and do a little better job than you did a year ago. How much money are you pumping back into yourself and your future? It's worth thinking about. And finally, the strangest secret. At the beginning, I said, what makes a child grow up into the human being he becomes? Well, this is the reason for that. Of course, he's the confluence of a genetic pool that goes back for thousands and thousands of years. His environment has an influence on him, of course. But what makes him become the person he becomes is that he becomes what he thinks about most of the time. It's as simple as that. We become what we think about most of the time. And that's the strangest secret. This is why thinking is so vital. This is why a goal is so important. Because we will become that. This is why people who set goals achieve them. The trouble with men is not in achieving their goals. They do that. It's in establishing them. Well, that's about it. I think it's good to remember that if we just go along with the crowd, we won't wind up with much more than the wish that we could do it all over again, and as far as we know, you can't. If we want to amount to anything as individuals, we need individual goals, individual thinking, individual actions. And we must never conform to the big group. We must love them, we must help them, we must serve them, because our whole success will depend on our ability to do these things. But never lose our own individuality and our identity by permitting ourselves to become submerged in what has historically proved itself to be little more than a suffocating sea of indirection and purposelessness. If we want to emulate someone, fine, but let's be choosy in whose steps we follow. It's the only life we've got. And remember to think. Imagination is everything, and we can become what we can imagine. If you find yourself getting depressed and down at the mouth, as we all get once in a while, you might want to remember this quotation by Dean Briggs. He said, "Do your work. Not just your work and no more, but a little more for the lavishing's sake. That little more which is worth all the rest. And if you suffer as you must, and if you doubt as you must, do your work. Put your heart into it, and the sky will clear. And then out of your very doubt and suffering will be born the supreme joy of life." Believe it or not, in an age when we've come to nearly deify leisure time, we've almost lost sight of the fact that virtually all our satisfactions, rewards will come not from our leisure, but from our work. And don't forget, the strangest secret. We become what we think about.